Hey guys, it's Tiffany. Today I'm doing episode 3 of my teaching history series. I placed my first and second videos in one playlist called Teaching History so that these videos would be easy to find if you missed one or if you wanted to reference one later, and I will link them up here somewhere. Today I'm going to be talking about how I taught the River Valley Civilization unit. So what that is Mesopotamia, the Nile River Valley, the Indus River Valley, and the Huang He or Yellow River Valley. So if you teach this, or you're going to be teaching this, or if you just want to see what I did, then stick around and I'm going to share all of that with you. Let's get started. So this is my Unit 3 binder for the River Valley Civilizations, and this one is pretty thick compared to some of my other ones. This is a really big unit. This past year during this unit, we actually had a hurricane come through South Carolina, and because of where we lived, we had to evacuate. So we missed a few days of school. This past school year right there in the beginning was a little bit rocky, but it all worked out. So for this unit, my lesson plans from last year actually have 5 weeks of lesson plans. So just like with my last unit, I created the test first. The test, again, I made on USA Test Prep. This test contained 22 multiple choice questions, a map that they had to label, and there were 7 things they had to label in there. It was actually focused on Egypt. They then had a sorting where they were comparing and contrasting for Mesopotamia and Egypt. And then they had a short answer essay, which was, how is Judaism different than previous polytheistic belief systems? Be sure to include the beliefs, the laws, and written sources. And they had a second short answer essay question, which was, compare the role geography played in the development of any of the River Valley civilizations. So they could pick any one that they wanted to of the 4 and then tell me what the role of geography was as to why a civilization developed there. All right, so once I had my test created, we then did our vocab, and this foldable is just like the other that I showed you. And I actually pulled one of my student notebooks so I could show you from their perspective also what we did. So you can see her vocab foldable is in her notebook, and when you open it, she did her definition, her explaining the term in her own words, and then drawing pictures to illustrate what that term meant. The next thing that I like to start a unit with is mapping. The first unit was a little bit different, but from here on out, you'll see I start everything with a map. This mapping foldable actually looks like this. You can find this on my Teachers Pay Teachers store if you're interested. I also will link it down below for you, just like I did in the last video. Any videos, other TPT stores, free resources, or anything from my store that I used, I will link it for you down below. This foldable looks like this, and it has the 4 civilizations, and then they had to also write the rivers for that civilization and the modern day countries that that civilization is in. Then there is a world map inside. Obviously, I could have focused on just this area, but I wanted them to see it in context of the whole world, and they had to draw a little blue line for the river, kind of circle the area, and label each of the 4 River Valley civilizations. And the way that I did this map is, when we studied Mesopotamia, which is where we started, they labeled Mesopotamia. And then every time we started a new one of the River Valley civilizations, they had to start with this map, go back to it, and label it on there. So like I just said, we started with Mesopotamia. And for Mesopotamia, I had a PowerPoint and guided notes. Again, I'm showing you these from a student notebook perspective. And so she has her notes, and there was a PowerPoint that went with that one. And once we completed the PowerPoint, we actually did a series of stations with these foldables. Now, I don't always use the cutout, really complex foldables because I feel like kids can get bored with doing that all the time. It's messy, it uses a lot of time, and in social studies, we don't really have a lot of extra time typically because we have a lot of content to cover. I mean, this class starts at the earliest human and goes through the 1600s. That is a massive amount of time. So, but I do on the bigger units like this one where we have more time to do things and cover more things, I do like to take time to do these on occasion. So they had, each foldable goes with a different station that they went to. You can see these were the developments of Mesopotamia, all of those things. It goes into the different groups in Mesopotamia. So you have the Assyrians and the Babylonians. And then that was it for Mesopotamia. Their way of life, writing, religion, city-states, tribes. Oh, I forgot the Akkadian Empire. And in the PowerPoint, I just gave them a base intro to Mesopotamia. Like I said earlier, and you'll hear me do this for every unit, my PowerPoints are not extremely complex or long. There's not tons of details saturated on there. It's just to give them a basic foundation, so then we can move on to learning in other ways, like moving through stations or watching videos and things like that. In the previous year, I actually had my kids do the Hammurabi's Code DBQ, but for this year we didn't really have time to do that because of the hurricane. It kind of stole some time from us. Otherwise we would have done that. We did read an excerpt from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Then there are these things that I created my first year, these oral narratives, and they weren't as much of a hit with my advanced students as they were with my ESOL students, especially my lower level ESOL students. But they're basically just these little ways for them to remember things. So the first one was like, in Mesopotamia, they had temples known as ziggurats. They lived in city-states. They had a class system. They worshipped many gods. They were polytheistic. So they have like these little hand motions, and you can do it as a warm-up or to end the day or just something fun. When you have such a big unit and there's so many things for them to remember, doing something fun like that where their body's involved. I believe it's whole brain teaching that talks about when you have your body involved with remembering the term or the idea, it really sticks it in your brain because your whole body is working towards that concept. So we just did like a fun little thing. After we finish Mesopotamia, we go into the Nile River Valley or Egypt, depending on how you address it. With this one, obviously they go back to that original map that I showed you, and they map the Nile River Valley on there. But I also found this, and I believe I got this on Teachers Pay Teachers. Wherever I got it, I will try to link it down below. But it's a foldable like this, and I just gave them a printout of the Nile River Valley, and they drew it on here. They had to label the Red Sea, the Eastern Desert, the Nile River, Nubia, the Western Desert. Some of my classes had a little more time and they made this super colorful and creative. Other ones didn't have as much time. And then just with Mesopotamia, we started with a PowerPoint and a guided notes foldable. This one is extremely short, but they did have to do a big short answer essay question, or not essay, but just short answer question. And it was after completing the Nile foldable, describe below why you think the Egyptians established their civilization around the Nile. That really is the key point for this unit. Besides all of the inventions and things like that, they really needed to understand what it was about geography that allowed them to establish these civilizations. They were able to irrigate, they were able to farm, have a more consistent food source. They were able to trade and travel and do all of these things. So those were really just kind of like base points that I wanted to hammer in. And then I have, and by the way, these stations with the foldables that I'm showing you, the foldables came from Marvelous Middle School. I'll show those to you in just a second. But I got a whole River Valley Civilization packet from that TPT store. And it comes with like bullet points for the information for these foldables, but it doesn't really give you a way to present it to your students. So you kind of have to create how you're going to give this information to them yourself, which was fine with me. I just printed out slides from a PowerPoint that I created and put them around the room. and that worked for us. You can see the different foldables that we did for Egypt. It covers Upper and Lower Egypt, the flooding of the Nile, which was important to understand because it brings the silt up onto the riverbank, making it fertile. Ancient Egyptian writing, talking about hieroglyphics. The different facts about religion in ancient Egypt, mummification. At this mummification station, I also had them pull out their tablets, and I sent them to a website, which I will link down below, where they actually get to mummify. It's like a cartoon interactive thing, but they get to mummify. They like have to pull out the brain. It sounds really gross, but if you teach middle schoolers, they're probably gonna enjoy it, but it's just a little simulation where they get to do mummification. Kind of like a brain break, right? They're going through, they're getting all these facts, and then they get to this one station where it's a little bit exciting and they get to
pull somebody's brain out of their nose. No big deal, right?
The pyramids, comparing geography was a thing they needed to know. That was it for Egypt. This is one of the packets that you get from Magnificent Middle School. This is one of the packets you get. It has the foldables, and then it just has like bullet point information, so it doesn't come with a PowerPoint or really created stations or anything like that. You kind of have to do it yourself, but it does give you the different foldables and kind of like a basic reference to the information. I did like the foldables, but I do find it exhausting when they have to cut so much. The way I did that is I gave them all of their foldables on the day we were going to start the stations, and we all cut it out and glued it in at the same time. I glued the stuff in my interactive notebook. If you're curious about how I do an interactive notebook, I'll link my video up here for you. But under the document camera, I cut and glued into my notebook with them so that they could follow along and keep a steady pace. So if you do purchase the Magnificent Middle School bundle with those foldables, just know that it's going to give you the information for the foldables, but it's not going to give it to you in a way to give it to your students. So you will have to create that on your own, which is really not that big of a deal. There was also a really good reading if you were looking something as an intro or just to enrich the content a little bit, from ReadWorks, and I'll link that site down below. But it was about making mummies in ancient Egypt, and that also comes with questions if you like to do readings and questions. The next one that we did was ancient India, and this is I believe, no, it used to be, I'm not sure. Ancient India used to be offered for free, and then the other three you would have to buy. I think I got ancient India for free. And then we also did a PowerPoint about India. We're looking at, there were 8 modern day countries that this particular River Valley civilization touched, and then home of the Himalaya mountains. We talked about the 3 great rivers in India. We covered monsoons and the role of monsoon season, and Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, the Aryan migration and how they brought down the Vedas, different empires that developed in the area later on, the Persians, the Mauryan and the Gupta, arts and sciences under the Gupta, and then religions or philosophies that developed in the area. This one's kind of odd because in the River Valley civilizations, if you go too far, you kind of start to enter into what we're going to teach later on in the Asia unit. So, you know, we kind of went a little bit farther, and then in Asia, we kind of backtrack a little and cover it again. But then they have a good background knowledge for the topic by the time we get to Asia. And then our last civilization was the Huang He or Yellow River. And this was the ancient China bundle that I got. The dynasties, I had them do a mini research project where they had to pick one of the dynasties and they had to research it and answer the following questions. Which dynasty is it? What are some important achievements of this dynasty? When did the dynasty exist? Was there an important religion at the time? Who was the first ruler? In your research, did you find anything else interesting? And finally, why did you select this dynasty? What about it interested you? So then they had to write a little short essay inside about that dynasty. Anyway, so we started China with that information. We had another PowerPoint with basic notes to get that down for them, where we covered it's in modern day China, it's on the continent of Asia. The major river is the Huang He or the Yellow River. And it's not the oldest civilization, but is believed to have existed for the longest amount of time. Like the other valleys, the rivers provided water for irrigation. We covered Taoism, also known as Taoism. and yin and yang symbol, Confucianism with Confucius, the family is important and the basis for that. So we covered all of that. Once we covered all of the units, I actually took a week, which was something different that I changed from my first year to my second year. I took a week to really go in on the religions and their development. Although I mentioned the religions as I went through each unit, like Taoism in China, I just didn't feel like the religions got enough focus. And one of the things that showed on South Carolina's data is that world religions were one of the things that students struggled with the most on their state exams. So I had decided already that religion was something that I was going to hit very hard over and over again throughout the school year. So this foldable is what I created to go with ancient religions, just to kind of hammer them in for that final little remember this religion, it's really important moment. I printed out these readings, which were online resources from the textbook that we use. I don't use the textbook, but occasionally I would go into the workbook readings because I really liked those, and I would print those out and we would use those as warm-ups or for something like this. And so they would read the reading, and there was a place on the foldable for each one. So first, they had questions for Hebrews and Judaism, section 1. There was a reading, section 2. The teachings of Confucius and Lao Tzu, ancient India, and then ancient India 2. So the first one was Hinduism, the second one was Buddhism. And all of these readings go with this. So this wasn't something that we did in one day, but it was something that we did over the course of a few days. So they would come in and the warm-up would be to get out that foldable and work on that. So what would happen each day during this religion week? They would come in and there would be either a reading or EdPuzzle assignment up. Up above, I have linked my video on technology, my favorite websites that I use in the classroom. So you can check that out if you want to, but I would use EdPuzzle to introduce the video. Then they would have to do one of those readings, answer the questions, and then they would get into groups and kind of discuss that. And then from there, I would either show some kind of PowerPoint that was meant for discussion, not notes, where we would compare and contrast as a class the religion we were studying that day and the one that had come the day before. And then that would pretty much take the entire class period. So it just kind of gave us a moment to watch a video, discuss it as a class, discuss it in a small group, and do a reading to really hammer in those ideas for the religion. And then the last thing that we did was my River Valley Civilizations project. This is one of my favorite projects that I've ever created, and it is in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. I will link it down below. I do have examples of my students' projects, but if you follow me on Instagram, you know that a couple months ago we moved across the country and a couple of my boxes are missing. I'm missing some of my teaching stuff, which is a long story. I'm not gonna get mad about it right now. I have a couple things missing that I need to find. And along with that are my student projects. So this is the rubric for the project. Now the one in my Teachers Pay Teachers I have updated so it looks a little bit different, but it's the same general concept. They had to, and I gave them one of those giant Post-it sticky notes. They had to draw 26 boxes like so, take up the whole page, and each box was a letter of the alphabet. And then for each box, they were doing a key term or idea from the River Valley civilizations. Now, Mesopotamia and Egypt tend to be the ones that students gravitate towards. I don't know if it's just because there's more information available about those or if they're just more interested, especially Egypt. And I wanted this project to just kind of take everything we learned and just
stick it in their brains,
where they knew without a doubt what my expectations were and what they were supposed to know from this unit. And if all that they took the time to look at was Egypt or Mesopotamia, that was going to leave out the Indus and the Huang He. So I made some specific requirements for this project. They had to find 7 terms for Mesopotamia, 7 terms for the Nile River Valley, 6 terms for the Indus River Valley, and 6 terms for the Huang He River Valley. So they couldn't have 20 terms for Egypt, 2 terms for Mesopotamia, 2 terms for the Huang He, and 1 term for, or however that comes out to 26. They couldn't just pick their favorite one. They had to pull terms from each one, and this got their brains going. I put them in very small groups to do the project, and they really had to search through their notebooks to find a term for A through Z. Obviously Z ended up being ziggurats most of the time, not always, but it was a very fun project, and by the end they had gone through their notes better than they ever would just studying on their own. Their test scores were great, they remembered what they were supposed to, and it was a great project. This took a while. This took about 3 class periods, which I don't normally allot that much time for. This was a massive project. This was taking up a whole post-it note with those big giant post-it notes. They had to color it and decorate it and research the terms. Day 1 was just term research, and day 2 and 3 were working together to create their poster. Once that project was completed, just how I end every unit, they had a study guide. They got this study guide when they walked in. They started it for their warm-up. They had 15 minutes to use their notebook to work on it individually. We then played Kahoot or quizzes, whichever I chose to make. And then from there, we went back to the study guide. They finished anything that wasn't complete, and we discussed it as a class. The next day was the test. And on test day, they got the next unit, which is ancient Greece. They got the vocab for that after their test, and they started that. And then this leads into my next video, which will be all about ancient Greece. For this video, there's just so much in the River Valley civilizations. If you've ever taught this unit, then you know that. But the basis of what I tried to do for this unit was to mapping. Obviously, every single one gets put on that one map. The second thing, their vocab, so they have the key terms before we start. And then each different River Valley civilization started with a very short, brief PowerPoint that gives them the key points. We then went into stations, which had, some of them had videos at the stations, which I've linked down below. Some of them were just the foldables that I showed you from the TPT shop, which is also linked down below. And then sometimes there was a reading or EdPuzzle involved. Most of my warm-ups during that week were with Mentimeter, which I will link below, and EdPuzzle. Those were the 2 things I used over and over in this unit. But I just tried to do me, and then you, and then me, and then you, and then me, and then you. So it wasn't just me talking, but I also didn't just throw them out there on their own. We kind of alternated back and forth. So I hope that you found this video useful. Let me know in the comments how you teach the River Valley Civilizations unit. Do you use foldables? Do you use stations, PowerPoints, videos? Did you do any projects? Did you do a DBQ? Did you write Hammurabi's code? Because normally I would have, except for that hurricane. Let me know down in the comments what you do. I had a lot of really good interaction over on Instagram. So if you would like to follow me on Instagram, this is my username. You can find me over there, and we can hang out and have some really good conversations and learn and grow together as teachers. I'll see you in my next video, and if you haven't already subscribed, please click that little button, and I will see you next time. Bye!